G'day Earthlings, Dr. Rank here, and welcome to Gaming Legends, the show that prepares for trouble and makes it double. Pokémon is the largest RPG franchise in existence, built on the foundation of gotta catch 'em all. But I for one think it's unwise to have a wild animal as a pet. I prefer my pocket monsters pre-domesticated. Can you beat Pokémon Yellow version without catching any Pokémon? Why the yellow version, you ask?
Because nobody likes him.
Our goal is to earn all 8 gym badges and defeat the Elite Four without ever catching a single Pokemon. Quote-unquote catching refers to the act of a human player using a Poké Ball during battle. This applies to all types of Poké Ball, including the Great Ball, Ultra Ball, Master Ball, and Safari Ball. All other methods of obtaining Pokemon that are possible on original Game Boy hardware are fully allowed. Though I will not be going for any event Pokemon because my time machine has a broken flux capacitor. Sorry Mew fans. And as a bonus challenge, we're going to fill out the maximum possible number of Pokedex entries. That means current or previous ownership of as many unique species of Pokemon as possible. And finally, save states and cheat codes are completely banned. With an asterisk. The original Game Boy cartridges rely on batteries to hold save data, and if those batteries die, so does your save file. Even if you replaced the battery yesterday, there's no guarantee it will hold a charge for the entire run. In the interest of not having to leave the game on for 3 months straight, save states on the analog pocket may be used to preserve save data. But they may only supplement the in-game save system, not replace it. Without further ado, let's begin our Pokemon journey. Our starting Pikachu is encountered during the catching tutorial, but thankfully Professor Oak is the one who throws the Pokeball, and Oak is legally not a human player. He then decides to give me the Pikachu, which I happily add to my team. Sadly, Pikachu will be alone in our party for a while, as wild Pokemon aren't exactly eager to be our friends. Plus, this particular Pikachu is incapable of evolving within Pokemon Yellow, so our Pokedex remains at only a single entry for the time being. Of course, what would a playthrough of Gen 1 be without the perfect rival?
Hey, what's up? This is Cheese from Cheese and Things, and my job today is to both shamelessly promote my own Pokemon Yellow challenge that you should go and watch after you're done watching this one, and I'm also here to fight Dr. Rank at the least opportune moments. Our first 2 battles in Professor Oak's lab and Route 22 might seem inconsequential, but their outcomes influence my choice on how my starting Eevee evolves in the late game, and which of these 3 Pokemon get benched for it. If you beat me to a pulp in both battles, I'll get a Jolteon, along with a clamping Cloyster and a fire-spinning Ninetales to accompany it. Trust me when I say, you don't want to deal with that combination.
Okay then, I guess I'll just have to be bad at video games. If we lose to Cheese in either of the first 2 battles, he'll throw his Thunderstone in the trash and evolve his Eevee into either Flareon or Vaporeon, replacing the Ninetales or Cloyster respectively and eliminating one of the 2 trapping moves. He does still put a Magneton on his team, but it can only paralyze you, which is the lesser evil. So we intentionally throw the first battle by spamming Growl and completely skip the second, forcing Cheese to stick with Vaporeon.
Dude, you intentionally let your Pikachu faint? Wow, I bet he really hates you now.
Oh yeah? Well, that is an accurate assessment. Our first roadblock comes at the Pewter City Gym. Brock uses only Geodude and Onix, both of which are rock and ground type Pokemon. All of the damaging moves Pikachu can learn by leveling up are either electric type, which does nothing against these Pokemon, or normal type, which does almost nothing. And this early in the game, we don't have access to any TMs that can help us, nor any other gift Pokemon besides our starter. The path to Route 3 is blocked off by an overzealous tour guide until we beat Brock, and every other direction requires an HM we haven't found yet. It is possible to skip past this guy in red and blue with a properly timed pause and save, but that glitch has unfortunately been patched out of all releases of Pokemon Yellow.
Okay, so why not just go to the Cable Club at the Pokemon Center and trade your Pikachu for a Mankey or something? Mankey can learn a fighting-type move, Low Kick, at level 9 in Yellow, so it should be able to beat Brock easily.
Well, Cheese, there's a very good reason why I didn't trade my Pikachu. Because I can't. The only way to get a Mankey through trading is if your trading partner already has one, and the only way they can get a Mankey in the first place is by catching it, which is just as illegal as if we'd caught it ourselves. And we don't just have to consider the specific Pokemon they're trading, but also every action they took on the path to obtaining it. Even if they didn't catch the Dugong itself, they still could have caught something else that made it possible to reach that Dugong. Pokemon trading in a catchless run is only a valid option if your trading partner is themselves on a pure catchless save file, which isn't particularly helpful at this point in time. But just because Pikachu struggles with Brock doesn't mean he can't beat him. While normal type moves are resisted by rock types, they do still deal some damage. Pikachu learns Quick Attack at level 11, and by spamming it we can slowly chip away at both Geodude and Onix. This will be more effective when combined with Tail Whip, a move that lowers the opponent's defense up to a maximum of 6 times per Pokemon. I highly recommend stocking up on potions before starting. You will absolutely need them. The Onix will occasionally use Bide, which charges for 2 turns and then deals twice the damage it received. But 2 times 0 is still 0, so instead of attacking, use the opportunity to heal and or set up Tail Whips without any risk of getting hit. Once its defense is at -6, keep spamming Quick Attacks until the Rock Snake eventually falls, earning us the Boulder Badge on the first try without having to do any grinding.
Show off.
At the Pokemon Center on Route 4, we can talk to this man who gives us our second Pokemon for 500 yen, Nineveh the level 5 Magikarp. It only knows Splash right now, which does literally nothing, but it can at least learn Tackle at level 15. To get it leveled up, we'll have to keep it at the front of our party and immediately swap to Pikachu with every single Pokemon we encounter. Once Magikarp reaches level 20, it will evolve into Gyarados, one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. Unlike Pikachu, Gyarados can learn the HM moves Surf and Strength, which are required in the late game for water travel and rock pushing respectively. The sooner we get this fish leveled up, the better. After defeating the Super Nerd in Mount Moon, we come to a critical juncture. We're given a choice between the Helix Fossil and Dome Fossil, which can eventually be resurrected into Omanyte and Kabuto respectively.
But unfortunately for you, the 2 fossils are mutually exclusive. Whichever one you don't pick is selfishly donated to the Kanto Museum. It's impossible to legitimately have both fossils on one save file. Of course, I managed to do that in Pokemon Red by using the Brock Through Walls glitch to grab the fossils from behind. Please, ladies and gentlemen, hold your applause. But that glitch requires you to have a Bulbasaur as your starter, and thus was patched out of yellow.
Fine, I guess I'll take the Dome Fossil. But don't worry, I'll be back for that Helix soon enough. In Cerulean City, we come to the actual reason I chose Pokemon Yellow. In all other versions, your starter is a choice between Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, but you only get one of them for the entire game. Yellow, meanwhile, allows you to obtain all 3 as gift Pokemon on one save file. LeafGreen the Bulbasaur is obtained from Melanie's house if Pikachu's friendship is high enough, Fire Red the Charmander is given for free just north of Nugget Bridge, and Bob the Squirtle is received from Officer Jenny in Vermilion City after clearing its gym. To even access the Vermilion Gym though, we need to use the Cut HM to cut down a tree. HMs can only be used in the overworld after earning a certain badge, in this case the Cascade badge from Misty, whom Pikachu and LeafGreen can easily deal with. We also need the SS ticket from Bill, which allows us to board the SSN and fight Cheese for the HM itself.
We're in international waters! This battle doesn't count!
Now that we have the Cut HM, we can teach it to either Fire Red or Leaf Green, and finally gain entry to the Vermilion Gym. Lieutenant Surge only has a single Raichu, which I easily dealt with using the Dig TM, earning us the Thunder Badge and the right to use Fly. While we're here in Vermilion, we can also grab the Bike Voucher, which we can exchange in Cerulean for the Bicycle to make outdoor travel much faster. Learning Cut also opens up the route towards Lavender Town, but first we have to get through Rock Tunnel. This dungeon is pitch black, a problem normally remedied with the Flash HM. While both Pikachu and the Charmander line can learn it, the HM itself requires at least 10 Pokedex entries to obtain. To get all 10, we'd have to get at least one of the starter trio to its final evolution, which doesn't happen until level 32 for Venusaur and 36 for Charizard and Blastoise. Thankfully, all the walls and ladders are still visible, albeit in Virtual Boy mode. And if one of your Pokemon happens to be poisoned, the screen will flash every 4 steps, pointing out nearby trainers to potentially avoid. In Celadon City, we can find a free Eevee in Celadon Mansion, giving us a full party of 6. Eevee is the only Pokemon in this generation that has branched evolution, becoming either Flareon, Jolteon, or Vaporeon depending on the stone used. The Firestone, Thunderstone, and Waterstone can all be purchased infinitely from the Celadon department store for 2,100 yen each. Unfortunately, since we only get the one Eevee for the entire save file, catchless or otherwise, that means we only get a single evolution out of it. In later games, this problem could be solved by creating more Eevee through breeding, but in Generation 1 they hadn't invented sex yet. The Kanto Daycare Center can only accept one Pokemon at a time, and they do in fact need 2 to tango. So we settle for just a Jolteon for the time being. An even more important location, though, is the Celadon Game Corner. In addition to containing the Team Rocket hideout where we get the Silph Scope, this place allows us to get coins in our coin case. We could try using the slot machines to farm for them, but I'd rather not encourage gambling. Instead, we can buy them outright from the front desk at a rate of 50 coins per 1,000 yen. These coins can be exchanged at the prize corner next door for several exclusive Pokemon. These include Vulpix, which we can immediately evolve into Ninetales with a Firestone, Wigglytuff, Scyther, Pinsir, Porygon, and, most importantly, Spooner the Abra. Spooner is already at level 15 and will evolve into Kadabra and learn Confusion as soon as it levels up. This lets us easily deal with Team Rocket's Poison-type Pokemon, gives us a backup plan for most of Erica's team, and makes the Ghastly line in Lavender Tower pushovers. Unfortunately, Kadabra only evolves into Alakazam when traded, and I wanted to see how much I could get done with just a single copy of Yellow first. Having access to a Psychic-type Pokemon also makes the Fighting Dojo in Saffron City trivial. Our reward for beating the dojo is our choice of a Hitmonchan or Hitmonlee, both of which would be amazing against normal types. But, just like the fossils, the 2 Hitmons are mutually exclusive. Hitmonlee has a higher attack stat, so welcome to the team, Bruce! You will serve me well against the 2 Snorlax on the way to Fuchsia City. But not before I beat up Cheese and Giovanni in Silphco.
Enjoy your Master Ball, loser! That thing is so worthless in this run. Even the Pokemart won't put a price on it.
Oh, I didn't come here for the Master Ball. This NPC in the room where I fight you gives us a free Lapras. This girl learns Ice Beam at level 38, which will be extremely useful against the Elite Four's Dragon types. By this point, Fire Red had fully evolved into a Charizard, which is a milestone in more ways than one. Charmander and Charmeleon can't learn the Fly HM, but Charizard can, exclusively in Yellow. We now have a method of fast traveling to any city in the game that we've been to. I took this opportunity to grab the old Amber from Pewter, which we can eventually revive into an Aerodactyl, and drop off Lapras at the daycare center for some passive EXP farming. Koga was a total pushover with Spooner, giving us the Soul Badge and the right to use Surf. Once we grab the HM from the Safari Zone, where nothing else interesting happens, we can travel across the ocean to Cinnabar Island. Not only does this mean we can fight Blaine at the gym, getting every question wrong because we can't read Japanese, but we can also access the Pokemon Lab and finally revive our fossils. Of all the dungeons in the game, the one I dreaded the most was the Saffron City Gym. Sabrina has the entire Abra line all at level 50. The Abra can be a total PP drain with its constant accuracy drops, and the other 2 have insanely high speed and special stats and can heal themselves at any time. Plus, being pure Psychic types in Gen 1, they have almost no weaknesses. The strongest bug move in the game only has a base power of 25 and is exclusive to the unobtainable Beedrill. Dark type hasn't been invented yet, and a colorblind programmer at Game Freak made Psychic Pokemon immune to ghost moves. Luckily, Kadabra and Alakazam have extremely low defense stats, meaning they can't tank physical attacks as well as they can special attacks. Whether an attack is considered physical or special is determined solely by its type. Fire Red has the highest attack stat on my team, so I made him my ace for this battle. His best attacking option was Fly, which has a base power of 95 and also gets the same type attack bonus due to Charizard being a flying type. By spamming this move, I was able to take down Sabrina's Alakazam and earn the Marsh badge. Compared to that fight, Giovanni in the Viridian City Gym was a pushover, meaning we finally have all 8 badges and can proceed to the end game.
Unfortunately, you've barely been doing any grinding your entire run, so half your team are still in the level 30s. You only barely managed to scrape past me on Route 22 even with type advantages. You could grind quickly by duplicating rare candies to level up all your Pokemon in an instant, but the item duplication glitch doesn't exist because Missy-No can't speak Japanese.
Then I guess it's time to do some actual grinding. Victory Road has the strongest Pokemon we can handle with a wide variety of type weaknesses that I can take advantage of. After reaching the exit, I stuck around until most of my Pokemon were at least level 50, with the only outlier being Bob the Blastoise at level 45. During this grind, I also managed to defeat Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres in their respective dungeons. I did this for the EXP and no other reason. I also grabbed the Payday TM and taught it to Pikachu, allowing me to get extra cash for post-game coin grinding. With the team as ready as they can be, the time has come to face the Elite Four. Lorelei is a pushover if you lead with Bruce. The Elite Four will prioritize moves that are super effective against you, even if it's the worst possible choice they could make. Lorelei's Dugong, for example, will always use Rest against Hitmonlee, which does absolutely nothing to me. Set up attack boosts with Meditate, then take out both Dugong and Cloyster in one hit with High Jump Kick. Slowbro has extremely high defense and special, but also extremely low speed. This makes it the perfect target for Bob's Fissure, which only works 30% of the time and only if you're faster, but always one-hit KOs. Fire Red's Flamethrower can deal with Jinx, and either Bob or Bruce can deal with Lapras. Bruno, as the song suggests, barely needs talking about. Both Onix are quad weak to Surf, and the Hitmons go down easily with Fly Spam. His Machamp is a little beefier, but its low special stat makes Spooner's Psychic an almost guaranteed one-hit kill. Spooner can also sweep Agatha single-handedly. The only threat her Haunter and Gengar pose is Dream Eater, which only works if you're asleep. If she does happen to land Hypnosis on you, you can wake yourself up infinitely with the Poké Flute. Lead with Pikachu against Lance for a quad-weak Thunder against his Gyarados, then swap to Lapras for the rest of the battle. Use Ice Beam on both Dragonair, Hydro Pump or Surf on Aerodactyl, and one more quad-weak Ice Beam against Dragonite. Use Revives and Full Restores to heal your entire party, put Lapras at the front, and prepare yourself for the final showdown with Cheese.
And with a 10 level disadvantage, this isn't going to be an easy one. My Sandslash falls easily to a single Hydro Pump, but I immediately follow up with an Alakazam, which is just as dangerous as Sabrina's. Charizard's Fly does about 5/8 of its health, but it takes 2 turns to use, during which I can use Recover to heal completely.
Fortunately, my second Fly managed to land a critical hit, putting you in the metaphorical red and allowing me to immediately deal the finishing blow with Cut. Charizard's Flamethrower did just under half against Exeggutor, but he immediately got KO'd by a Stomp, leaving Lapras to clean him up with Ice Beam.
Oh, you're going to use Lapras as your water type? Big mistake, Dr. Rank. You may have gotten my Ninetales down to 1 HP with Hydro Pump, but the fact that you could use Hydro Pump was nothing short of dumb luck. Ninetales is faster and knows Fire Spin, a move that traps you in a damaging vortex for several turns and prevents you from attacking. Since Lapras is an Ice-type Pokemon and Ice is weak to Fire, I always command Ninetales to use Fire Spin on every single turn. Unless it happens to miss a second time, your Lapras is a sitting ducklet.
Very true, Cheese. But Bob isn't. Since Blastoise is a pure water type, your Ninetales has a chance to use Quick Attack instead, giving us an opening to finish it off with Bite. Use Spooner's last 2 Psychic PP to take out Magneton, then swap to Pikachu for one final bout with Vaporeon. Paralyze it with Thunder Wave, hit him with 3 Thunders, and finish the job with one final Thunderbolt. The Pokemon Yellow Don't Catch 'Em All run is officially conquered! But we're not done yet. Remember, we've still got the bonus challenge of filling out the Pokedex. Clearing out every single gift Pokemon and Game Corner purchase, which requires over 25,000 coins, puts our Pokedex at 27 entries. There are some NPC traits that could theoretically give us more, but they all require us to give them a specific Pokemon that's either only found in the wild or unobtainable in yellow. There's also a free Psyduck we could download from Pokémon Stadium, but only if we have all 151 Pokemon registered in the Hall of Fame by beating the various cups with them in our party. While Stadium does give you rental Pokemon to use in each cup, Mewtwo is the one Pokemon that can never be rented, requiring you to import your own from the Game Boy games. And good luck convincing this guy to just hop in the ball. Plus, there's the matter of mutual exclusivity with the fossils, evolutions, and dojo Pokemon. If only there was a way to exchange one of our Pokemon for a different Pokemon.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Hold your freaking horses there, Dr. Rank! Didn't you say that Pokemon trading was banned?
No, I did not say that, Cheese. I said Pokemon trading with players who have caught Pokemon is banned. But Pokemon trading with players who have not caught any Pokemon is fair game. Of course, each unique Pokemon game has its own version-exclusive Pokemon to not catch. So if you want to do a max % catchless run, then you have to do it 4 times. On 4 separate save files, with 4 separate cartridges, in 4 separate Pokemon games, with 2 separate analog pockets to manage the save states. Dear Arceus.
But wait, aren't there only 3 Pokemon games in Gen 1?
Only if you speak English, Cheese. The game we know as Pokemon Blue version is actually a remake of a Japanese game called Pocket Monsters Green. It features the same Pokemon in the same locations, but with the graphics and bug fixes from Pocket Monsters Blue, a completely separate game that came out 10 months later and has no English counterpart. If we want every single Pokemon this run has to offer, we need to use every single Pokemon game, including the Japanese Blue version. And since it's not possible to trade between Japanese and English Game Boy cartridges without corrupting both save files, all the other games have to be the Japanese versions too. Pokemon Red, Green, and Blue play out mostly the same as Yellow, though a bit more speedrunish. The first major difference is at the start of the run, where we have to choose either Charmander or Bulbasaur as our starter. They're the only 2 that can learn Cut, so they're required to get past Cerulean City. These versions can also skip fighting Brock. Before approaching the youngster blocking the path, pause the game and highlight the save button, then close the pause menu. Trigger the youngster's dialogue, close it with the B button, and immediately pause and save. When you reload that save, you can proceed to Route 3 as if he was never there. We can also skip getting the Silph Scope from the Rocket Hideout by buying a Pokédoll from the Celadon department store. Using it guarantees a successful retreat from wild encounters, including the Ghost Marowak in Lavender Tower. The only gym leaders we actually need to fight again are Misty for Cut and Koga for Surf. And we can skip grabbing the HMs themselves by trading Bulbasaur and Gyarados over to Yellow, teaching the HMs there, and then trading them back. I also recommend beating Lieutenant Surge to unlock Fly, and trading over the Aerodactyl from Yellow to use it. In terms of Pokemon, make sure at least one of these games grabs the opposite fossil from Mount Moon to the one you got in Yellow, as well as the opposite Dojo Pokemon. You'll also need the Eevee in at least 2 games, allowing you to get the missing evolutions. Pokemon Green will be the shortest of the 3, as all we need from this version specifically is a single Nidorino from the Game Corner. Once we buy it, we can trade it to Yellow and immediately use a Moonstone to evolve it into Nidoking. Similarly, Pokemon Red has an exclusive Nidorina in the Game Corner that we can evolve into Nidoqueen. Both Red and Green also sell Clefairy and Dratini at the Game Corner, but they're cheaper in Red for some reason. I actually bought 2 Clefairy, one to evolve into Clefable with a Moonstone, and the other to trade in Yellow for a Mr. Mime on Route 2. Meanwhile, Pokemon Blue's game corner has a non-starter Pikachu and a Horsey, which we can evolve into Raichu and Seadra respectively. Make sure you trade each Pokemon to Yellow before it evolves so you can get all the Dex entries. The Raichu will make a brief stop in Yellow before going to the lab on Cinnabar Island in either Red or Green, being traded to an NPC for an Electrode. His counterpart in Blue instead offers a Graveler in exchange for a Kadabra. We can't use the one from Yellow as he'll just evolve into Alakazam when traded to a human, but we can get a different Abra from the Blue game corner and evolve that one. Once we receive the Graveler though, it immediately evolves into Golem, registering both species in Blue's Pokedex simultaneously. But for Yellow's Pokedex, which is our primary save file, it only lets us get the Golem entry and not Geodude or Graveler. With the aid of Pokemon Red, Green, and Blue, our catchless Pokedex is upgraded to 48 Pokemon. And that is every single Pokemon that we could possibly obtain. In the Kanto region? What, you didn't think this video was about Gen 1, did you? Can you beat Pokemon Crystal version without catching any Pokemon? Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal are backwards compatible with Pokemon from the Generation 1 games via the Time Capsule, which is unlocked after meeting Bill in Ecruteak City. But more importantly, Pokemon Red, Green, Blue, and Yellow are also forwards compatible with Pokemon from the Generation 2 games. As long as the Pokemon exists in the Kanto Pokedex and doesn't know any Gen 2 exclusive moves, you can trade it back and forth between generations with no penalty. And it just so happens that each Johto game has a crop of catchless Kantonians that can only be obtained in that version. Which means we need septuple catchless save files on septuple Game Boy cartridges in septuple different Pokemon games. Dear Arceus! For your starter this time, I recommend choosing Steve the Totodile in all 3 games, as it makes the best HM slave. The only HMs it can't learn are Fly and Flash, which are optional, and Waterfall, which you don't even need until Victory Road. This does mean we miss out on the Chikorita and Cyndaquil lines, but that's fine. Remember, we only care about the Kanto Pokedex.
Good luck fighting my starter with just one Pokemon though. By the time I have a Bayleaf, I can easily two-shot you with Razor Leaf.
Well, it's a good thing I don't have just one Pokemon then. After defeating Faulkner in the Violet City Gym, head to the Pokemon Center to pick up a Togepi egg and give it the Switch TM once it hatches. It's not going to be an amazing battler even after it evolves into Togetic, but it's better than nothing and can even make a decent flyer. In Azalea Town, we get to meet Kurt, who has the ability to make Poké Balls from apricorns. I didn't mention this earlier to preserve the plot twist, but every ball that Kurt makes is completely banned in this run. Not that I'm particularly keen to use a Moon Ball anyway. A more significant attraction is the Azalea Gym, where we can easily beat up Bugsy and cut our way through Ilex Forest. Once we arrive in the bustling city of
Goldenrod,
we can visit the Goldenrod Game Corner and buy our first Kanto Pokemon. Pokemon Gold has Ekans, Pokemon Silver has Sandshrew, Pokemon Crystal has Cubone and Wobbuffet, and all 3 have Abra we can use as relatively cheap bargaining chips. Plus, if we get a spare Cubone, we can evolve one into Marowak and trade the other for a Machoke in Yellow's Underground Path, which immediately evolves into Machamp. As for Machop, we can trade an Abra for one in Crystal's Goldenrod, then trade that Machop to Blue before evolving it. Once we have a Machoke in Blue, we can then trade that for a Haunter/Gengar in Cerulean. And I checked, we do not have to visit the Celadon Game Corner again. Just north of Goldenrod is a guard who gives us Hikyaku the Spearow. You're supposed to deliver this Spearow to his friend on Route 31, but there's nothing stopping you from auditioning for Team Rocket. We actually need to get Hikyaku in at least 2 separate games. One to get the Fearow Dex entry, and one for an NPC trade in Red or Green's Vermilion City, which gives us a Farfetch'd. In order to actually reach Ecruteak City and unlock the Time Capsule, you'll need to use the Squirt Bottle to fight the Sudowoodo blocking the path on Route 36. Before you can get the Squirt Bottle though, you have to beat the war of attrition that is the Goldenrod City Gym. Whitney's Miltank is infamous for its high defense and disruptive moveset, and you have to fight her 3 times. If her health falls into the yellow, she'll always use Milk Drink to heal back up. But what if she wasn't able to use Milk Drink? Get her to just above half health with Steve's Water Gun, then swap to Spearow to bait her into using Rollout. Spearow will immediately die a painful death, which functionally just gives you a free switch in for Steve. Once a Pokemon starts using Rollout, they're forced to use it again for the next few turns, getting stronger each time. In the meantime, Steve can keep spamming Rage, a move that also gets stronger every time you get hit, letting us drain Miltank's health bar faster and faster until it runs dry. With Whitney crying over spilt milk, we can get the squirt bottle, beeline to the Ecruteak Pokemon Center, and rendezvous with Bill. The time capsule won't actually be operational for another 24 real-world hours, so you may as well use the downtime to make progress in the other games. Pokemon Silver can stop playing at Ecruteak since all we needed was the one Sandshrew from the game corner. It only knows Scratch and Defense Curl, so we can trade it to Yellow immediately without having to visit the move deleter. But Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Crystal aren't done yet. There's an NPC trade all the way in Blackthorn City, asking for a female Dragonair in exchange for a Rhydon in Gold and Silver, or a Dodrio in Crystal. This does require multiple Dragonair that haven't evolved into Dragonite, but we can buy Dratini from the game corner in Gold or Silver, or get a free one from the Dragon's Den in Crystal after beating Claire in the Blackthorn gym. In order to reach Blackthorn though, we need all 7 prior gym badges. The Ecruteak gym is a pushover. Feraligator's Bite is a Dark-type move in this game, which makes short work of Morty's Ghost types. Beating Morty allows us to use Surf, the HM for which is found in the Ecruteak Theatre by beating all the Evolutions. At this point, we can beeline for the Lake of Rage via Mahogany Town, make every single shiny hunter gasp in horror, and obtain the Red Scale. This can be given to Mr. Pokemon in exchange for the EXP share, which automatically gives the XP to the Pokemon that holds it without them having to participate in battle. On the western side of the map, we can visit Olivine and Cyanwood cities for the Strength and Fly HMs respectively, as well as their gyms. Chuck only has 2 Pokemon, both with mediocre defenses, so Feraligator's Strength took them down pretty easily. Jasmine uses Steel types, which are notorious for their defensive prowess, especially in Gen 2, where they also resist Ghost and Dark. But none of her Pokemon resist Water, and her Steelix is actually weak to it. Her 2 Magnemite are still an offensive threat to Steve, but he should easily be able to outspeed both of them. Back in Mahogany Town, we meet up with Lance and punch Team Rocket in the face, both to open the Mahogany Gym and to get the Whirlpool HM. Honestly, the hardest part of Price's gym battle was physically reaching him. Cut me some slack, I haven't played this game in 7 years. Surprise plot twist, Team Rocket didn't like being punched in the face and decided to take jobs in the music industry as a creative outlet for their frustration. During this part of the story, both the game corner and the Blackthorn gym are completely cut off, meaning we have to put an end to their failed DJ careers.
I wasn't a failed DJ, I was pre-successful.
Thankfully, this quest is completely optional for Gold and Silver. If you cleaned out the game corner in advance, you can just head straight through the ice path to Blackthorn. Crystal, meanwhile, absolutely needs that 8th gym badge. Despite me being over-leveled as usual, Claire actually gave me a bit of trouble. Her Dragonair All-No Thunder Wave are too beefy to die in one hit, are resistant to Surf, and her second Dragonair knows Thunderbolt. On my first attempt, Steve got paralyzed by the first Dragonair and put in the red by the second, meaning he died on the third and the rest of my team was too weak to finish. On the second try, I managed to avoid paralysis on the first Dragonair and chose to use other Pokemon for the second. My Togetic survived one Thunderbolt, allowing it to get a Metronome in. This ended up using Flame Wheel, which, while not very effective, inflicted a burn on the Dragonair. With Steve at full strength, he managed to survive long enough to finish the battle. Before officially receiving the Rising Badge, we have to head to the Dragon's Den, make the only required use of Whirlpool in the entire run, and blindly stumble our way through the Social Services questionnaire. Once that's done, and you've gotten Claire's TM, save the game and talk to the Dragon Master to receive your free Dratini. Remember, the NPC trade specifically requires a female Dragonair, so reset if you end up with a guy. Once you have the correct Dratini, you'll need to grind it to level 30 to make it a Dragonair. Since we already have access to Victory Road, you may as well grind there. Once it evolves, you can finally head to Blackthorn and trade your Dragonair for a Dodrio in Crystal and a Rhydon in Gold. The Rhydon can be exchanged for a Kangaskhan on Route 11 in Blue, which itself can be swapped for a Muck on Cinnabar Island in Yellow. But before starting that trade chain, we can use the Rhydon for something else. Just south of Goldenrod is the Daycare Center, otherwise known as the Birds and the Bee Drill. Unlike its Cantonian counterpart, the Johto Daycare allows you to drop off 2 Pokemon at the same time. And if those 2 Pokemon are of opposite sexes and have at least one egg group in common, they'll do some basic multiplication. Once an egg is created, it will always hatch into the lowest stage of the mother's evolution line. For example, a female Machop and a male Abra will always produce a Machop egg. Obviously, the easiest way to breed the exact Pokemon we want would be to use a Ditto, but Ditto is unfortunately found exclusively in the wild, making it unobtainable. We need as many of our Kanto Pokemon to be female as possible, while also having potential mates for all of them. Rhydon and Dodrio are the easiest to breed with, as their NPC trades are guaranteed females. Rhydon can breed with either Nidoking or Feraligatr to get a Rhyhorn, while Dodrio can breed with Togetic to get a Doduo. Slightly harder is getting a female Wigglytuff to breed with that same Togetic, but it can be obtained infinitely from Yellow's Game Corner and has a gender ratio that's biased towards girls. This gives us an Igglybuff, which, with enough friendship points, can evolve into Jigglypuff. It will take a while to build up enough friendship though. The biggest boost you can get is from the Haircut Brothers once a day. I only got 1 Haircut boost in, and it evolved at level 31. More significant jumps in difficulty are Gengar and Muck, both being exclusively in the Amorphous egg group. Thankfully, Wobbuffet is also in this egg group and can be found in the Crystal Game Corner. However, since both of these Pokemon can only be obtained from NPC trades, you only get 1 of each per save file, and if either of them turn out to be dudes, it'll be you who gets screwed instead. Unfortunately, the gender of a Pokemon is not a visible stat in the Gen 1 games. The only way to tell at a glance is if it's a single-sex species like Kangaskhan, Tauros, or the Nidorans. And the game forces you to save right before and right after trading with human players, so we can't just transfer it to Gen 2 to check. But don't worry, we can still deduce a Pokemon's gender before the transfer by using IVs. For those who aren't aware, individual values, or IVs, are essentially Pokemon genes, a set of 4 numbers between 0 and 15 that are assigned randomly at birth and cannot be changed. IVs are used primarily to determine the stats of the Pokemon, but in Gen 2 they have a few other uses. The Attack IV in particular determines the Pokemon's gender. The lower the Pokemon's Attack IV, the more likely it is to be female. The IVs aren't visible in-game either, but we can just use the IV calculator linked in the description. Both Gengar and Muck have 50-50 gender ratios, so we need them to have Attack IVs of 7 or lower to get a female. If the Pokemon we get has an 8 or higher, we can just load a save from before the NPC trade and try again until we find a match. Once we have both a female Gengar and a female Muck, we can use Wobbuffet to father a Ghastly and Grimer, evolving the former into Haunter. The absolute hardest Pokemon to breed for was Geodude. Golem is in the Mineral Egg group, so the father needs to also be from the Mineral Egg group. Unfortunately, the only catchless Pokemon that fit this egg group are Electrode and Porygon, both of which are genderless and thus can only breed with Ditto. We could get a male Onix from an NPC trade in Violet City, but they ask for a Bellsprout in exchange, which is unobtainable. That just leaves Golem itself as the only viable father, which means we need 2 Golem of the opposite sex. And since we can only get a Golem through an NPC trade, and NPC trades can only be performed once per save file, that means we have to play Pokemon Blue twice, play all the way to Cinnabar Island, and make sure we get a different gender Golem each time. That's right, we need octuple catchless save files! Dear Arceus! After going through all of that, we can finally hatch a Geodude, trade it to Yellow, and evolve it into Graveler. But even the power of love has its limits. As I mentioned, Electrode is genderless and refuses to breed with anything but Ditto. Since we can't get a Ditto, we have no way of obtaining a Voltorb egg. The only other way to get a Voltorb would be to trade a Krabby for one in Olivine, which would itself require us to first trade a Growlithe for a Krabby in Blue. Good luck doing that without a Growlithe to trade with. The only other incomplete evolution lines that we've started are the Nidorans. The only way to get a Nidoran male catchless is to trade a Nidoran female to this NPC in either red or green, and Nidoran female is itself unobtainable. You might think we could just slap our Nidoqueen into the daycare and wait for the pregnancy test, but the colorblind programmer at Game Freak already put her through menopause. Both Nidorina and Nidoqueen are in the undiscovered egg group, which means they are completely infertile no matter who their partner is. In order to get a Nidoran through breeding, you need either a Nidoran female specifically, or any member of the Nidoran male line. And since Nidorino and Nidoking are male-only Pokemon, they have no influence on the species of the offspring unless the mother is a Ditto. Until we can somehow find a way to conjure a Ditto out of thin air, there are no further eggs we can obtain.
Ah, but what about the odd egg? You can get this egg from the daycare man in Crystal, and it will hatch into one of the 7 baby Pokemon at random, with a higher chance of it being shiny than normal.
Unfortunately, Cheese, that's not an option for me. In the Western version of Crystal, the odd egg is just given to you for free. But in the Japanese version of Crystal, you need an egg ticket first, which is an event item that was discontinued 20 years ago. This makes it impossible to obtain Smoochum and Jinx, Elekid and Electabuzz, or Magby and Magmar in the Japanese games without catching them. We could get these Pokemon if we were playing in English, but that would mean playing the other games in English too, which would make the 11 Pokemon that are exclusive to the Japanese Blue version inaccessible. Sacrificing 11 Pokedex entries to get 3 more is not a good business strategy. With the Kanto and Johto regions completely cleaned out 8 times over, the Pokemon Yellow Don't Catch 'Em All run ends with a final score of 73 Pokedex entries. If you're expecting me to pull out a triple plot twist and catch the next flight to Hoenn, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green have no official way to communicate with the Game Boy games since they use completely different link cables. Nothing released after the year 2000 will help us get any extra Pokemon.
But that doesn't mean you're completely done, right? After all, you did give Pokemon Crystal a dedicated title card, and you did already reach the Indigo Plateau. If you don't finish the job now, you'll inevitably get a dozen comments asking you to make a Gen 2 video.
In that case, Cheese, I guess we better pull up a montage. With Lance's illegally underleveled Dragonites demolished by a legally overleveled Lapras, the Pokemon Crystal Don't Catch 'em All run is officially conquered. This run was expensive, both financially and chronologically, but I don't regret it for 1 second. If you'd like to watch the run, the livestream archives are linked in the description.
And if you want to see more of me, I got my own video where I try to beat Pokemon Yellow with as few Pokemon as possible. You can check out that video by clicking on this card. And be sure to subscribe to both of us, so that you don't miss out on the next video.
That's all for now, and I will see you down under.